Teives, Venטען, Chapter 16. 1. A person's protests are not accepted in the following situation. Reuven stole the field of Shimon, and Levi was one of the witnesses who signed the deed of sale. Afterwards, Levi came and protested Shimon's ownership of the field, claiming that Reuven stole it from him. We do not heed Levi's protest, nor do we pay attention to the proofs he brings concerning his ownership of that field. He has forfeited all his rights to it, for we tell him, how could you serve as a witness to the sale and then come and protest? Similar concepts apply if Levi gives testimony in a legal document that speaks of the field belonging to Reuven on the east or on the north. Since he referred to that field as an identification marker for the sake of another person and recorded this testimony in a legal document, he forfeited his right to it and cannot issue a protest concerning it. For we tell him, how could you serve as a witness in this matter, legal document that mentions this field being near another field, and then issue a protest concerning it? 2. If in the above situation the witness claimed there was one row that I designated as a sign, but not the entire field, that row that is next to the boundary of the field alone belongs to Reuven. This is a claim that is worthy of being heard. He may protest the ownership of the entire field with the exception of that row. All the above concepts apply only with regard to one of the witnesses to a legal document who comes to protest. When, by contrast, a judge verifies the authenticity of the signatures of the witnesses to a bill of sale, he may protest the ownership of the field even though it was mentioned in that bill of sale. The rationale is that he can claim I did not know what was written in the bill of sale. For a judge may verify the authenticity of the signatures for the witnesses to a legal document even though he did not read it. Witnesses, by contrast, may not sign a legal document unless they read it in its entirety and paid attention to its details. 3. The following rules apply when Shimon comes and consults Levi, telling him, I am buying this in this field from Reuven, I will buy it with your advice. Even though Levi tells him, go and buy it, it's good. Levi has the right to protest Shimon's ownership. He does not forfeit this right because he did not perform a deed. He can tell Shimon, I desire the field, leave the hands of Reuven, for he is a man of force, so that I can lodge a claim in court and take possession of my field. Yeah, better make better friends. Okay. 4. The following was applied when Reuven protests Shimon's ownership of a field, and Shimon tells him, I do not know what you are talking about. I purchased the field from Levi. Here are witnesses who testify that I benefited from it from the amount of time necessary to establish a claim of ownership. Reuven responds to him, I have witnesses will testify that yesterday evening you came to me and asked me to sell you this field. This is not proof of Reuven's ownership. Shimon could say, I decided to purchase it from you so that you would not protest and trouble me to enter legal proceedings, even though I do not know whether or not it is really yours. Similar laws apply in all analogous situations. If Shimon does not make such a claim, the court does not advance it on his behalf. 5. The following was applied when Reuven protests and brings witnesses who testify that the field belongs to him, and Shimon, who is in possession of it, claims you sold it to me, and I benefit from it for the amount of time necessary to establish a claim of ownership. Reuven responds, you benefited from the field as a robber. Whether there were no witnesses, they benefited from the field, or whether there was only one witness who testified that he benefited for 3 years, the person in possession is not required to return the produce to the consumer. The rationale is that he is claiming, I consume my own produce, and there are no witnesses who are obligating me for the produce. On the contrary, he acknowledged it himself. And the witness who testify that he benefited from the property for 3 years is coming to reinforce the power of the person who benefited. Indeed, if there were another witness with him, the person in possession would be allowed to retain possession of the field. Therefore, Reuven must take a shvus hezes that he did not sell the field, and that the field is returned. Then the field is returned to him. Shimon must take a shvus hezes that he does not owe Reuven anything, because of the produce he consumed, he is then released of liability. 6. When there are 2 witnesses who testify that Shimon benefited from a field for less than the amount of time necessary to establish a claim of ownership, he must return all the produce he consumed. Even if there was only one witness, he is liable to return all the produce because of his testimony. The rationale is that he is not contradicting the testimony of the witnesses. Instead, he is saying, he testified truthfully. I did consume the produce for 2 years, but I consumed what was mine. He is obligated to take an oath, but unable to do so, hence he must pay. 7. The following principle applies whenever a person is obligated to return the produce he consumed. The extent of the benefit is unknown. The court is unable to estimate, i.e., in contrast to the houses and the like, which have a standard rate, the benefit received from the produce of the trees and the produce of the field, since the owner does not have a definite claim. He is required to pay only what he admits to have consumed. We issue a conditional ban of ostracism against anyone who consumed more produce and did not make restitution. 8. The following laws apply when a person in possession of property is required to return it. If he rented the property to others while he was in possession of it and the renters are accessible, we expropriate the rent from them a second time and give it to the owner of the land. They, in turn, should lodge a claim against a person who rented them land that he did not own. That's harsh on the renters. 9. It is forbidden for a person to lodge a false claim and distort a judgment to prevent its execution. What is applied if a person was owed a money by a colleague, he may not lodge a claim against him for 200 zuz that he will admit owing a money and be obligated to take an oath. If a person owes a colleague a money and the colleague claims 200 from him, he should not say, I will deny the entire amount in court, so I will not be required to take an oath and acknowledge the debt of the money in private. 10. When a person owes money to 3 people and he denies owing a debt to one of them, the 3 should not collaborate and perpetrate the following scheme. One person will claim the entire sum, and the others will falsely testify to his claim. When the money is expropriated from him, they will then divide it. With regard to things of this nature and the like, the Torah, Exodus warns us to keep a distance from words of falsehood, midvar sheker tirchak. B'nechama, at the time, blessed be God, grants assistance. Hilchos נחלות. Chapter 1. It contains one mitzvah for the laws of the order of inheritance. This mitzvah is explained in the following chapters. 1. This is the order of inheritance. When a person dies, his children inherit his estate to receive priority over everyone else. The sons receive priority over the daughters. 2. In every situation, the female does not inherit together with the male. If a person does not have children, the father inherits his estate, and the mother does not inherit his son's estate. This has been conveyed by the oral tradition. 3. With regard to every concept of precedence for inheritance, the person's blood descendants receive precedence. Therefore, when a person, either a man or a woman, dies, and he leaves a son, he inherits everything. If the son is no longer alive, we look to see if the son left descendants. If there are descendants of the son, whether male or female, even the daughter of the son's daughter, and this chain can be continued endlessly, that descendant inherits everything. If the son does not have descendants, we return to the deceased's daughter. If there are descendants of the daughter, whether male or female, this chain can be continued endlessly. That descendant inheritance everything. If the daughter does not have descendants, the estate returns to the deceased father. If the father is no longer alive, we look to see if the father left descendants, i.e. the brothers of the deceased. If there is a brother of the deceased or the descendant of a brother, he inherits everything. If there are no brothers, we return to look to see if the deceased had a sister. If there is a sister or the descendant of a sister, that person inherits everything. If there are no descendants of the deceased brothers or sisters, since there are no descendants of the deceased father, the estate returns to the deceased paternal grandfather. The paternal grandfather is no longer alive. We look to see if the paternal grandfather left descendants, i.e. the uncles or aunts of the deceased. The males receive precedence over the females, and even the descendants of the males receive precedence over the females, as is law with regard to the descendants of the deceased himself. If there are no uncles or none of the descendants, the estate returns to the deceased paternal great-grandfather. Following this pattern, the chain of inheritance continues to extend till Reuben, the son of Jacob. Thus, the order of inheritance as follows: a son takes precedence over a daughter. Similarly, all the sons' descendants take precedence over the daughter. The daughter takes precedence over her paternal grandfather, and similarly, all her descendants take precedence over her paternal grandfather. The deceased father takes precedence over the deceased brothers because they are the father's descendants. The deceased brothers take precedence over her sister. Similarly, all their descendants take precedence over the sister. The deceased sister takes precedence over her paternal grandfather, and similarly, all her descendants take precedence over her paternal grandfather. The deceased's paternal grandfather takes precedence over the deceased's uncles. The uncles take precedence over the aunts, and Indeed, all the uncles' descendants take precedence over the aunts. Aunts take precedence over the deceased paternal great-grandfather. Indeed, all the aunts' descendants take precedence over the deceased paternal great-grandfather. This pattern should be continued till the beginning of all generations. Thus, there is no Jew who does not have heirs. For when a person dies, leaves a daughter and a daughter of the son, or even the daughter of the son's daughter, this chain continues for several generations. The son's daughter takes precedence. She inherits everything. The deceased daughter does not receive anything. Similar laws apply when a person is survived by his brother's daughter and his sister, or by his uncle's daughter and his aunt, or in all analogous situations. 5. A woman is whoever given full rights in the following situation. A person has 2 sons who died in his lifetime. One of the sons left 3 sons, and the other left a daughter afterwards. The other man died. 3 grandsons inherit half of the inheritance. The granddaughter inherits the other half. For each inherit their father's portion. Similar laws apply with regard to the division of an estate among the children of the deceased brothers, the children of his uncles, or the children of other relatives, extending back until the beginning of generation. 6. With regard to the concept of inheritance, the family of each person's mother is not considered family. Inheritance is relevant only with regard to one's father's family. Therefore, paternal brothers do not inherit each other's estates, while paternal brothers do. This applies to brothers who share only a father or who share both a father and a mother. 7. All relatives who are conceived through forbidden relations have equal inheritance rights to those who are conceived through permitted relations. What is implied? When a person has a son or a brother who is a mamzer, he is treated like any of the other sons or any of the other brothers when it comes to the concept of inheritance. A person's son who is born by a maidservant or a Gentile woman is not considered his son at all, and has no right of inheritance whatsoever. 8. A woman does not inherit her husband's estate at all. A husband inherits all of his wife's property according to the words of our sages. He takes precedence over all others with regard to inheriting her estate. This applies even if she is forbidden to him. For instance, a widow who was married to a high priest, or a divorcee, or a woman who had performed a chalitza who was married to an ordinary priest. Similarly, this applies even if the woman was below majority, even though a husband is deaf mute, he inherits his wife's estate. 9. We have already explained the issue that a husband does not inherit his wife's estate until she enters his domain, that a man who is mentally aware does not inherit the estate of a woman whom he married as a deaf mute. This applies even if she later becomes fully mentally aware. Thus, we have also explained that a husband inherits the property that enters his wife's domain and which she took possession of during her lifetime. This applies to the property she brought to his household as a dowry and the property that she did not bring into his household. When a husband attempted to divorce his wife, although there was a question about the validity of the divorce, her husband does not inherit her estate after her death. 10. When a man marries a young girl who does not need the right of men to nullify a marriage, he does not inherit her estate because there is no marriage. Similarly, when a man who was mentally or emotionally unstable married a mentally aware woman, or a mentally aware man married a woman who was mentally or emotionally unstable, the husband does not inherit his wife's estate, for our sages did not ordain marriage for such individuals. 11. When a man's wife died, and afterwards her father, her brother, or any of the other individuals whose estate she may inherit dies, her husband does not inherit their estate. Instead, the estate should be inherited by her descendants if she has descendants. If not, the right of the inheritance should return to the father of her husband's home. The rationale is that the husband does not inherit property that is fit to become hers afterwards, only property that she already inherited before she died. 12. Similarly, a husband does not inherit his wife's estate while he is in the grave, as is the ordinary pattern of inheritance for members of his father's family. What is implied? A man died, and afterwards his wife died. We do not say since the husband receives precedence over all others with regard to their inheritance, the husband's heirs should receive precedence over the woman's other heirs. Instead, the woman's heirs from her father's family inherit her estate if she dies after her husband. 13. Similarly, a son does not inherit his mother's estate while he is in the grave, so that the estate will be inherited by his paternal brothers. What is implied? A person died, and afterwards his mother died. We do not say that if the son were alive, he would take precedence in the inheritance of her estate, and hence the heirs of the son take precedence over the heirs of this woman. According to the latter conception, the son's paternal brothers would inherit the estate of his mother after her death. This view is not accepted. Instead, if the son has children, they should inherit his mother's estate. If he does not have children, the estate should return to her father's family. If, however, the mother had died first, then the son died, even if he was a newborn baby who was born prematurely, since he survived his mother and then died. He inherits his mother's estate and then transfers the rights to that estate to the family of his father. Chapter 2. 1. A firstborn receives a double portion of his father's estate, as Deuteronomy states, to give him twice the portion. What is implied? If the father left 5 sons, the firstborn receives a third of the estate, and each of the other 4 receives a sixth. If he left 9 sons, the firstborn receives a fifth, and each of the other 8 receive a tenth. We follow this pattern, dividing the estate in all instances. 2. When a firstborn is born after his father's death, he does not receive a double portion. This is derived from Deuteronomy. On the day when he transfers his inheritance to a son, he shall recognize the firstborn, the son of the hated one. If his forehead emerged during the lifetime of his father, even though his entire head did not emerge until after his father's death, he receives a double portion. 3. When a firstborn was born with his genitals covered by flesh, and afterwards an operation was performed and it was discovered that he was a male, he does not receive a double portion. Conversely, when an ordinary son was born with a similar condition, after the operation was performed and it was discovered that he was a male, he does not reduce the firstborn's share. These concepts derived from Deuteronomy, and she will bear him sons, implied that the sons must be sons from the moment of birth. 4. What is meant by saying that such a son does not reduce the firstborn share? A person who had a firstborn, 2 ordinary sons, and this son whose genitals were covered by flesh and afterwards were revealed through an operation, the firstborn receives 1/4 of the estate as his extra share as the firstborn, as if there were only 2 other sons. The remaining 3/4 of the estate are divided equally among the 2 ordinary sons and the son who underwent the operation and the firstborn. 5. A child who lived for only 1 day reduces the portion of the firstborn, but a fetus does not. Similarly, a son born after his father's death does not reduce the portion of the firstborn. 6. When there is a question if a son is a firstborn or an ordinary son, for instance, the firstborn became mixed together with another, he does not receive a double portion. What is done? If at first the babies were distinct and then they became mixed together, they may compose a document granting power of attorney to each other. On that basis, take the portion of the firstborn with their brothers. If the identity of the firstborn was never known, for instance, the 2 wives gave birth in one hiding place, they should not compose a document granting power of attorney for each other, for there is no extra portion of the firstborn. 7. The following laws apply when a person had 2 sons, a firstborn and an ordinary son. They both died during his lifetime after fathering children. The firstborn left a daughter, and the ordinary son left a son. The son of the ordinary son inherits 1/3 of the estate of his grandfather, i.e. his father's portion, and the daughter of the firstborn inherits 2/3 of that estate, her father's portion. The same laws apply with regard to the sons of the deceased brothers, or the sons of his uncles, or any other set of heirs. If the father of any of the heirs was the firstborn, the person who inherits his share of the estate also receives the firstborn share. 8. A firstborn does not receive a double portion of his mother's estate. What is implied? When the firstborn and elderly son inherit their mother's estate, they divide it equally. This applies with regard to a son who is the firstborn with regard to the laws of inheritance, and to one who opens his mother's womb. 9. The firstborn with regard to the laws of inheritance is the firstborn child to the father, as Deuteronomy states, because he is the first manifestation of his strength. We do not pay attention to the child's status vis-a-vis his mother, even if she gave birth to several sons previously. Since this was the first son born to the father, he receives a double portion of inheritance. 10. The son was born after stillborn babies. Even if the stillborn baby was alive when its head emerged from the womb, is considered the firstborn with regard to the laws of inheritance. Similarly, when a fetus was born after full-term pregnancy but was not alive when its head emerged, the son who follows is considered the firstborn with regard to the laws of inheritance. The term "the first of his strength" Deuteronomy uses with regard to the firstborn implies that no child before him emerged alive into the world. Hence, when a fetus was alive after its head emerged after a full-term pregnancy, a son born afterwards is not a firstborn, even if the first baby died immediately thereafter. 11. Neither a son born by caesarean section nor the son born after him is considered the firstborn. The first son was never born, and Deuteronomy states, and she bore sons to him. And the second son is not given this privilege, for he was preceded by another. 12. When a person had sons as a Gentile and then converted, he does not have a firstborn with regard to the rights of inheritance. If, however, a Jewish man fathered sons from a maidservant or from a Gentile woman, since they are not considered his sons, a son he fathers afterwards from a Jewish woman is considered his firstborn with regard to the laws of inheritance, and he receives a double portion of his father's estate. Very interesting. Even if the firstborn is a mamzer, he receives a double portion. 13. Even if the firstborn is a mamzer, he receives a double portion. This is reflected by Deuteronomy, but rather he will recognize the firstborn, the son of the hated one. This refers to a woman whose marriage is hated. Needless to say, this applies if the firstborn is the son of a divorcee or a woman who performed chalitza. 14. There are 3 individuals whose word is accepted with regard to the designation of a firstborn: the midwife, the mother, and the father. The midwife's word is accepted only at the moment of the birth. For example, a woman gave birth to twins. If the midwife said this one emerged first, her word is accepted. The mother's word is accepted for the first 7 days after birth when she says this one is the firstborn. His father's word is always accepted. Even if the father said that a person who was not known to be his son was his firstborn son, his word is accepted. Similarly, his word is accepted if he says that the person whom we consider to be his firstborn is not his firstborn. 15. When a father loses his ability to speak, we check the soundness of his intellect in the same way as is done with regard to a bill of divorce. If through his emotions he indicates or he writes that this is his firstborn son, that son receives a double portion. 16. If witnesses testify that they heard a father make certain statements that clearly indicate that a child is his firstborn son, the son receives a double portion even though the father did not explicitly say this is my firstborn son. 17. If the father was heard saying, this son of mine is a firstborn, the son does not necessarily receive a double portion of the estate because of this testimony. Perhaps the son was the mother's firstborn, and this was the father's intent. For the son to receive a double portion, the father must call him, my son, my firstborn.